Hi there, it's Matt here, and welcome back to the podcast. I want to tell you about a woman I met who came to me and my clinical team for sleep help. Let's call her Jessica. Her story is illuminating in a very literal way. She was 38, worked in marketing from a one-bedroom apartment, and was, by any reasonable measure, doing everything right. All the sleep hygiene tips, all sorts of supplements that in truth were a waste of money. She would buy every new gadget that promised better sleep. She had downloaded the apps. She had read the articles. She had quietly eliminated evening caffeine with a discipline that was deeply impressive. She had optimized everything she knew to optimize. And she was exhausted, not dramatically, not in a way anyone else would notice, but in the way of someone whose nights never quite fully recovered the days. What Jessica didn't know was that two specific moments in her ordinary day were shaping her sleep more than all of that combined. The first happened about 40 minutes after her alarm sounded, when she sat down at a north-facing desk in a room whose blackout curtains she never opened. The second happened around 6 o'clock, when she switched on the bright overhead light in her living room and opened her laptop. 2 moments, 2 biological signals, but here's the thing. From her brain's internal clock's point of view, both of them were completely wrong. This episode is about why her brain registered that and the problems it caused and the solution we found for her. It turns out that your body runs on a clock, not a metaphor, an actual molecular timepiece that your cells inherited from ancestors who lived before artificial light existed, before alarm clocks, before scheduled meetings. Every cell in your body carries its own cycling clock genes, and those cellular clocks govern nearly everything. When cortisol peaks in the morning, when your body temperature drops towards sleep, when your immune system shifts gears, when you feel sharp, and when the day starts to soften, all of those peripheral clocks need coordinating, something that keeps them synchronized with each other and with the world outside. That coordination comes from a tiny structure in the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, a cluster of roughly 20,000 neurons that you could fit comfortably on the head of a pin. And what it runs on, above everything else, is light. Think of the circadian system as a very fine watch, precision engineering, a genuinely beautiful mechanism, but not quite perfect. Left to itself, the average human internal clock runs on a cycle slightly longer than 24 hours. Without a daily correction, those extra minutes stack up. Within 2 weeks, your biology would be operating on a meaningfully different schedule from the world outside. The watch needs setting every single day. Light is what sets it. Specifically, morning bright light advances the clock, pulling your sleep and wake timing earlier. Evening light delays it, pushing everything later. The clock is genuinely bi-directional in its response, and the direction depends entirely on when the light arrives. The cells that carry out this work are not used for vision. These cells run in parallel, entirely outside of your awareness. They are measuring the light around you and transmitting one piece of information to the suprachiasmatic nucleus. Is it day or is it not? To fire robustly, these cells need substantial light intensity, well above what most indoor environments provide. They evolved in an outdoor world calibrated by the open sky, and as such, they are not easily fooled by a ceiling. The scale of this has been studied in ways that should, frankly, make more headlines than they do. Researchers tracked more than 400,000 adults over time. The pattern was clear and it was consistent. People who spent more time in outdoor light had earlier bedtimes, better moods, easier mornings that felt less groggy, and better sleep. they fell asleep sooner too. And the effects held up across age groups, across seasons, across the full mess of ordinary life. But here's the detail that makes this genuinely interesting. Duration didn't matter. People who spent longer in morning light didn't sleep proportionally better than those who stepped outside only briefly. What moved the needle was simple. Did morning sunlight happen that day or not? The circadian system, it turns out, isn't charging like a battery. It's listening for a signal. One clear cue early in the day that morning has arrived. Think of a conductor's opening downbeat. The orchestra doesn't need the baton waving for 3 hours. It needs one unambiguous gesture at the start. Everything that follows runs on that cue. So for, it must be at least a decade now, I have been an avid, probably more like rabid consumer of protein shakes. But the hard thing, honestly, in the supplement space, if you really understand and do your diligence, is this critical thing called trust. It is very hard to find a brand that you can truly trust. That's when I came across the company Puri and the really impressive founder. Even though I'm sure it makes them less profit versus other quick and loose companies, Puri takes quality more seriously than any company I've ever seen before. They have so many offerings, protein powders galore, but lots of other additions. But that's what I was focusing on here. Why did I choose them? Well, it's really for 4 specific reasons. Number 1, they are free from hormones. Number 2, they are free from GMOs. Number 3, they are free of any pesticides. And number 4, and this is the critical confidence part, every single batch is third-party tested for over 200 harmful contaminants, things like heavy metals, etc. All you have to do if you are a neurotic nerd like me, you can even scan the QRI code on the back of the product to get the third-party independent laboratory test results. That's how much trust and confidence they place in their product. By the way, if you want a recommendation, go for the dark chocolate flavored protein powder. It's just exceptional. In fact, it's wonderfully addictive. I didn't just say that. Anyway, it delivers 21 grams of protein per serving. And for folks of my podcast right now, you can save 20%. So go over to puri.com/Matt Walker, and that is spelled PUORI.com, Matt Walker. So again, that is PUORI.com/Matt Walker, and you will get 20% off your product. A second study covering 1,762 adults deepens the picture. Morning sunlight before 10 a.m. was linked to better sleep quality and faster sleep onset. Their whole sleep schedule had shifted earlier. Not just the moment they fell asleep. Morning light doesn't simply help you drop off sooner, it anchors the entire day. So how does light in the morning shape sleep that's still 12, maybe 14 hours away? It does so through a cascade. One signal at dawn sends a series of dominoes falling. It starts with a special kind of cell at the back of your eye. They're called melanopsin cells, named after the light-sensitive pigment they carry. And here's the strange thing about them. They have nothing to do with vision. You could lose every cell you use to see, every rod, every cone, and these would carry on working just fine. Their only job is to tell your brain whether it's day or night. They're light meters, essentially, wired straight to the master clock. When melanopsin cells catch bright outdoor light early, they fire an advanced signal up to the clock. The clock shifts earlier. Cortisol, which is supposed to peak in the first hour after waking, peaks on time instead of running late. Adenosine, the sleepiness molecule that builds steadily across your waking hours, accumulates on schedule, ready for the evening. And melatonin, whose release is timed by that same master clock, follows the anchor that morning light has set. Pull the anchor earlier, and everything downstream moves with it. To understand why, consider what sleep onset latency actually represents at the biological level. The time between lying down and falling asleep is governed substantially by melatonin, the hormone whose rise signals to every cell in your body that nighttime has arrived and sleep should begin. Think of melatonin not as a sleeping pill, but as the tide coming in, predictable, rhythmic, non-negotiable when the conditions are right. The tide rises at a time set largely by when your internal clock received its morning light anchor. Shift the anchor earlier in the morning and the tide follows it. Light at the beginning of the day is therefore not simply about the beginning of the day. It is sending instructions to the biological events of 12 to 14 hours later. Practically, this is better news than it might first appear. You do not need a long morning walk. You do not need a specific number of minutes. You need your eyes to encounter real outdoor light early before the first 2 or 3 hours of the day are spent in an artificially lit indoor environment. On even a heavily overcast day, ambient outdoor light reaches intensities that most indoor settings cannot match. Now consider what happens when you don't get that morning signal. In one controlled experiment, 27 people spent a full day in dim light, no meaningful brightness in the morning. Researchers measured the clock before and after using melatonin onset, the gold standard for telling you where someone's internal biology actually sits. After a single dim light day, the clock had drifted. Melatonin onset was delayed by about 14 minutes. One indoor day, one missed signal, a quarter of an hour of backward drift. 14 minutes sounds modest. It is in isolation. But think of the watch again. A ship's chronometer that loses 14 seconds a day is unremarkable on the first morning. Over a 2-week ocean crossing, those seconds become 3.5 minutes of error. The clock doesn't announce the accumulation, it just runs. And the ocean, or in our case the schedule that begins at a fixed time each morning, doesn't care about your intentions. It responds to where you actually are. The good news from that same experiment, bright morning light the next day pulled the clock forward and erased the delay. The system is resilient. One indoor morning is not a catastrophe, but it tells you something important about the default direction of drift. Without the morning signal, the clock moves backward, quietly, a little at a time, with no sense that anything has changed, until one day you notice it's taking longer to fall asleep and harder to wake up. Stretch this pattern across months and the picture sharpens. Researchers reviewing the literature on teenagers with delayed sleep-wake phase disorder, a condition where the body clock is stuck running later than school and work demand, found something specific. Compared to healthy controls, these adolescents were getting much less light in the morning and much more in the evening. The disrupted light environment and the disrupted sleep weren't two separate problems. They were the same problem, seen from two angles. And the modern indoor adult's day, from the circadian system's perspective, looks almost identical to that chronic dim light condition. You wake up before or after the useful morning window. You walk into a sealed building under fluorescent overhead lighting. You come home as the daylight is fading. You spend the evening in a lit interior. The clock receives its morning signal late, weakened, or not at all, so it starts to drift. Then there's the evening, where the problem runs in the opposite direction. If the morning is where we miss a signal we need, the evening is where we receive a signal our biology never asked for. And in some ways, the evening story is starker, though, as I'll get to in a moment, also more nuanced than I myself used to tell it. Melatonin, the tide that signals night, is suppressed by light. The mechanism is the same melanopsin system that runs the morning, only now it's working against you. When those cells detect light in the evening, they send a message to hold the melatonin and don't begin the transition to night yet. What's less appreciated is how little light it takes to trigger that hold, at room light intensities at least. In one careful study, 116 healthy adults spent their evenings under one of two conditions: either room light below 200 lux, an ordinary moderately lit living room, or dim light below 3 lux, which is the kind of low glow you'd get from a single small lamp. Room light delayed melatonin onset in 99% of people tested. Not most, not the majority, effectively everyone. Compared with dim light nights, room light suppressed pre-sleep melatonin by about 71%, cut the duration of melatonin release by roughly 90 minutes, and reduced overall melatonin output by around 12.5%. If melatonin is the tide coming in, the molecular instruction to every organ in your body that nighttime has arrived, then 90 minutes of suppression is the biological equivalent of rolling the tide back. Night after night, the lights in your home are telling your pineal gland that the sun set an hour and a half later than it actually did. Your alarm clock the next morning disagrees. The mismatch doesn't announce itself. It accumulates in how long it takes to fall asleep, in the fragmentation of the sleep that follows, and in the quality of the waking that comes the next day. Now extend that across a week. 7 nights at room light levels in the hours before bed. 7 instances of compressed biological night. 7 mornings where the alarm clock and the body are, to varying degrees, out of agreement about what time it actually is. The consequences aren't dramatic enough to be obviously attributable to light. They show up instead as a slow draining of the system, the kind of tiredness that accumulates in the margins, in how you feel mid-afternoon, in how quickly your patience runs out, in the small errors that a well-rested version of you wouldn't make. Sleep debt is a peculiarly invisible creditor. It collects steadily and almost never announces itself clearly. A partner for today's episode is AG1. I've been using AG1 for quite some time now, and just for the record, I buy it myself to stay away from any of those trappings of free product. AG1 has just released the new formulation, which is AG1 Next Gen. It's still one scoop once a day, but now comes with many upgraded probiotics, plus additional vitamins and minerals. I also explored their 4 human clinical trials to prove out their efficacy, with the data showing a marked boost in healthy gut bacteria. And that's the thing. I appreciate how AG1 keeps adapting to new scientific findings. They have made many formula changes over the years, and each new iteration keeps it at the cutting edge of this space. As I've mentioned, I began my AG1 journey over 4 years ago. Any company that holds their scientific rigor to the flames of clinical trials means a lot to me. So subscribe today to try the next gen of AG1. If you use the following link, you'll also get a free bottle of AGD 3K2, as well as an AG1 welcome kit and 5 of the upgraded AG1 travel packs with your first order. So make sure to check out drinkag1.com/mattwalker. That's drinkag1.com/mattwalker. Now, a word about screens, because the story is more subtle than I myself once told it. For years, The message from sleep science went something like this: screens are bad for sleep because the blue-enriched light coming off a phone or laptop powerfully suppresses melatonin. The first half of that sentence has held up. The second half, it turns out, hasn't. At least not in the way we thought. A good colleague of mine, Dr. Michael Gradisar, has spent over a decade carefully testing this idea. He and his team measured the actual light coming off phones, tablets, and laptops, even at maximum brightness, and found it generally tops out around 80 lux. That was well below the roughly 500 lux you typically need to meaningfully shift the circadian clock. Across about a dozen experimental studies, the average delay in sleep onset attributable to screen light alone was around 10 minutes. Real, measurable, but modest. Not on the same scale as the 200 lux ceiling fixture overhead. What this tells us is that the room versus screen distinction matters. From the bright living room lamp to the kitchen pendant, even the bathroom light you just brushed your teeth under, these reach intensities that genuinely move melatonin. The phone in your hand by itself mostly does not. But that doesn't let screens off the hook, and Gradisar is the first to say so. The evening damage they do is mostly behavioral rather than biological. Engaging content keeps you up past the time you were meant to fall asleep at. Scrolling fills the gap where the winding down process should have started, especially if you are someone of a personality type that is reward-seeking and/or impulsive. The device becomes a tool for emotional regulation or simply a way to fill the quiet. The result is a shorter night. The mechanism is different from the room light story, but the cost looks remarkably similar. Less sleep on a body whose clock is already drifting backward. So when you read that evening screen usage leaves people with measurably impaired attention the next morning, the question to ask isn't only how much blue light reached your retina, it's also how late the device kept you up and what the brighter lights in the room were doing while you were up. The light you receive in the evening is not neutral. It's a letter to your biology, and you're writing it with your ceiling, your kitchen pendants, your bathroom fixtures, and indirectly with whatever held your attention long past the hour when you should have been in dim light or in bed. With all that said, what does the evidence actually recommend? A consensus is starting to emerge among leading circadian scientists, drawing on decades of research, the sleep literature, and the practical realities of daily life. And the guidance is unusually specific. For the morning, meaningful bright light exposure, ideally outdoor and as early as practical after waking. Not for a prescribed duration and not after a qualifying number of minutes. Simply get outside, get real light, get it early. The evidence links even a brief window of morning sunlight to better sleep quality that same night, all transacted through the mechanism of the circadian anchoring that morning bright light provides. As for the evening, in the 3 hours before intended sleep, keep indoor light at or below 10 lux. 10 lux is dim, a single low wattage lamp in the corner, a screen at its lowest brightness setting, a candle at modest distance. It is not comfortable for working under a task light or cooking beneath a kitchen pendant or watching television on an uncalibrated screen. It is a genuine departure from the typical modern home in the evening hours. That gap between the recommendation and the ordinary reality is real, and bridging it requires deliberate intention rather than passive habit. The good news is that none of this requires any fancy products, no special glasses, no expensive bulbs, no subscription service. The mechanism is simple enough that a dimmer switch and the habit of using it will take you most of the way there. The expensive sleep products industry has an obvious commercial interest in making sleep optimization feel technically complex. The evidence on this question, at least, does not agree. The intervention is as old as the candle, and the biology that responds to it is considerably older than that. 6 weeks after Jessica heard this same explanation from our clinical team, her sleep tracker was showing something new. Sleep onset had shifted earlier by more than 20 minutes on average. Sleep efficiency had risen. She was waking before her alarm most mornings, not because she was sleeping less, but because her biology had received consistently an internally coherent account of when the day began and when the night did. She had not changed her mattress. She had not taken supplements. She had opened a curtain in the morning and turned off an overhead light in the evening. The biology responded accordingly. It tends to when you give it what it is actually looking for, what it is designed for. So here is the shape of it. 2 windows in your day carry disproportionate influence over your sleep. The morning window, early and real outdoor sunlight, anchors your circadian clock and is associated directly in the evidence with better sleep that same night. The evening window, the 3 hours before bed, is where ordinary domestic light does its most significant damage, delaying melatonin, compressing biological night, making the act of falling asleep harder than your own biology intends. Overall, neither change asks very much. A few minutes outside in the morning, a dimmer room in the evening. The science has done the difficult work of identifying what matters and why. And with that, I'll simply say thanks so much for listening. If I could have one ask, it would be to share the podcast with your friends and families. So please do take care and bye for now.